Welcome to SoundOff and our panel, Building Community Bridges. My name is Morgan Cairns, and I'm a local person about town. I work for Sled Island. I have my own promotions label, Crybaby. I work with Film Festival, the Winter Classic, Particle and Wave, lots of festival things, interdisciplinary things. And I have two amazing panelists I'm so excited to chat with. First, all the way from Toronto, just got here this morning, flew in.
Yeah, who has a pillow?
We'll need coffee. Someone bring the coffee thing in here. We have Riaz, who currently serves as the board vice president at Wavelength Music, a nonprofit arts platform championing independent music in Toronto for the past 20 years. His journey has also seen him intern at Paper Bag Records, freelance publicity for outside music, start his own music publicity firm, tour manage Chicks Dig It, and manage Music Calgary. So you have some ties here to the community. And then we have Q right here. Q Benjamin, also known as Q, is a Juno Award-winning Canadian artist, currently residing in Calgary. She's shaped by her diverse cultural heritage, born in Edmonton, Alberta, to parents of South Asian and Jamaican descent. Beyond music, Q's ambitions extend to sharing her story, journey, and insights based on her experiences and educated perspective. Guided by unwavering faith and a thirst for diverse connections, Q's pursuit of higher education led to a Bachelor of Arts degree in Gender and Women's Studies, nurturing her commitment to authentic storytelling and meaningful dialogues. So some very impressive folks we have here today. So building community, it's a very broad topic. And when I was going to do it, I was a little intimidated because it's such a big thing. And, we build community, in many ways in our lives. And I think that it's something that is really crucial in something like the music industry. When you enter the music industry, you're not choosing, maybe what some could consider like a typical career, a typical path. And so having that community support and something that can be very trying at times, I'm sure you all know, is really important. And so let's just start off. I'll start with you, Riaz. Can you tell me a little bit about the communities that you belong to or you create and what communities do you consider yourself a part of, either when you're in Calgary or Toronto? It
was interesting. I'll start off talking about just engaging in music as a fan first and foremost. I think growing up as a brown kid in Calgary, because I grew up here, going to shows, there was definitely I'd look around and I was the only person of color in those spaces, but there was an entry point at least to have shared values with folks who were also engaging in the arts and curious. And then I will say that through that I kind of really started my journey in wanting to bring more people into the community. So it's I think it's really important to look around you wherever you are, and that could be a venue as well. That could be working in an office and be who isn't here that I want to be here, and then figure out ways to welcome them into those spaces. And I think that's where it starts. So I would say that the music community is how I belong to. The South Asian community is who I belong to. Toronto arts community. But yeah, I think in a broader sense, it's more about looking around and just trying to bring other people into that community.
Mm-hmm. And so, a question for you, Q, what communities do you consider yourself a part of, either here in Calgary or when you weren't? Because you were also, it's kind of, you were in Calgary, now you're in Toronto, you were in Toronto, and now you're in Calgary, so we have that. So, kind of what communities do you, do you foster here, or do you see yourself as being a part of?
So I think very obviously, I guess it's the artistic community, but I think one of the bigger, it's a little bit of a broad stroke because my experience was so different coming from Edmonton. I won a Juno and then I got signed and then I moved to Toronto, right? Mm-hmm. So there's kind of a distinction between an industry artist versus artists that maybe are unsigned or they're signed to an independent label. So that was kind of I don't know if it was necessarily difficult to navigate, but picking up on the distinction, mm-hmm. I think was a little bit of a challenge at first, and just okay, so where do you fit in? And then also being a person who's from, I think one of my experiences is we glorify living in Toronto a lot, right? Like, especially in Calgary, Edmonton, everybody, Toronto's the place, but my experience was a little bit different because you go there and it's like, you're still somebody from Alberta. It doesn't matter that you're a person of color. It's like, oh, don't you guys ride horses there? Even in artistic communities, right? So it makes it very difficult, and it is a very different experience. And then for myself, I am an R&B, I started out kind of like R&B pop, and then I became a rapper, right? So even being in that field, from Alberta was a very challenging thing, and then I'm a girl, right? So it was kind of hard, I feel like, to belong to any one or the other, especially coming from Alberta. There's already such a, I guess, there's already just not a lot of girls in the field of like hip hop, R&B as it is in Alberta. And I think when you go to somewhere like Toronto, you do expect that you're gonna, oh, like, I'm gonna find all these friends. And it's really different because especially artistic communities, like we can be pretty cliquey, right? And I found Toronto was a lot like that too. So, and you know, coming back to Calgary as well and trying to integrate myself into like hip hop communities too. And like, I don't know if it's that I'm a girl or like what, but I think it's a very different thing also from coming from Toronto. It's almost like there's a perception around you, there's a persona around you, and so it's really hard to feel like you fit into that community and or be like embraced by those who were existing kind of in Calgary. So that's my experience, and I think, you know, the concluding answer is something to the effect of I feel like all of them and none of them at the same time.
Yeah, to add to that, you know, when I started working with bands as a manager, let's say, going to like shows and coming from like a really idealistic place and wanting like everyone to get along and everyone to kind of be connected, and other bands on the bill also be like, hey, what's up? Like, this is who I am, and here's like, what are you about? That doesn't always happen, but I do think that like you can either go two ways with that. It's like you can take that in and be like, okay, well, this sucks and this is how it is going to be 99% of the time, or you can kind of like try to build the ecosystem that you want to see and really try to change things and show up. And even if you get like a cold response from like other bands on the bill or other folks in the industry, because, you know, I think part of it is, you know, some of it might be intentional, some of it people often don't have any idea that they're acting in that way. They're just like have tunnel vision, they're just kind of bowling through their day. They're just like, I just need to get this gig done with and I'm out of here. But I think constantly showing up and trying to, like, if we're talking about community, bring values that, you know, still have that idealism into those spaces constantly, I think at least like that serves you well, and hopefully that spreads in some way.
Looks like it's really easy to get jaded, you know, kind of, and I think that can impact, like, I'll be totally honest, when I got this panel, I was like, building community, I was like, okay, you know, because sometimes, you know, even recently, sometimes I feel kind of jaded with, you know, the community just feeling, you know, frustrated, like, you know, trying to get things started. So I think that, you know, just trying to remember why you got into it's important. And I was gonna say this question for later, but I think because we're talking about it now, like, you guys talked about going from Calgary to Toronto, you know, kind of going into, like, you know, so you have experience going into new spaces. Do you have any advice for people who are like, I really want to, you know, kind of get into the music scene, I want to know people, I want to build my community here, but they're struggling. Like, was there anything that helped you, or did you, or like, helped you kind of break into those spaces, or?
I think it would be hard to give advice. I think it's so personal and situational, and it depends on the person that you are. Even when Riaz was speaking about just like, you know, sometimes you're not received well or whatever, like that's why I'm here, right? And I think, like, even to answer the question is like, that's why I'm here, because I think a lot of these conversations happen without artists in the room, without women in the room, without racialized female artists in the room, and I think that that's part of the problem, right? And like, I speak from a very unique place where, like, I'm a racialized woman and I'm an artist, right? And so I think it's just like being active. And then also, sorry, your point was something to the effect of, like, you know, you may not be received well, and I also see that with a lot of grace because I'm an artist. I know how much mental health things that I've had to deal with. I know how much like of my own stuff is stress or whatever else, like my own personal, emotional, psychological things. And so like that makes it difficult in some ways to receive other people sometimes with the warmth that I would like to, right? And so, you know, I just think, you know, sometimes having that advocacy for artists in the room and that empathy and that place, that relatability factor. So I think when it comes to building community and trying to find your niche, I honestly think in my experience, the most effective thing is finding friends, right? Like, and a lot of my friends have nothing to do with artistic communities and there's struggles that come with that, but also there's a lot of support that I get even artistically from my friends, right? And I think sometimes in this thing, like, because of the time that we're in and because we're also in a time where everybody wants to be an artist, everybody wants to have a platform, everybody wants to have some level of clout or fame or be an influencer, I think it's very hard. It can be very difficult to find community within the communities, especially artistically, that exist because of that reason. A lot of times it's not real and genuine connection or community because people sometimes want something from you, or it can be catty or just clout chasing, right? So I think it's just a matter of like personalizing the approach for you and making sure that you can have genuine connections around you, even if it's just family or friends.
Yeah, I think, you know, that's a really good point. I think it starts with like, before you can kind of be there for anyone else and have capacity to do that, you need to be kind to yourself. You need to make sure that you're taking care of yourself, that this was told to me, like your cup is filled, right? But I think by having those things and equipping yourself in a way that then you can show up in the best way possible for whoever you deem your community to be. I think that's the first thing. I think the main thing is taking things at your own pace and realizing that everyone will have a different kind of timeline approach, and that's okay. But I would say that if you're talking about like actual tangible things that you can do also to build community, I think, you know, I hate to say COVID because we all try to like not say COVID, but like that pandemic really, it did a couple of things, some positive in terms of how people engage with each other and like cross collaboration. I think it brought many opportunities of cross collaboration, which have since kind of died down, and people have kind of gone back to a bit of a tunnel vision approach to how they engage in the world or in their own like craft. So I'd say like always keep in mind to try and kind of stick with doing that. I think it's reaching out to people and even like cold calling, like, you know, it's not on you if someone again doesn't receive that well, but I think it's always helpful to like put yourself out there. Like I always like, if I go into like rooms with people, and even if I'm talking to a band or artist, I'm like, my first question is like, what is your like dream of how this scenario would work out for you? And that includes who you get in touch with and who you're connecting with, and like reach out to those people. You know, you never know. It doesn't take much time, and you never know like who's going to receive you. If not, like you weren't reaching out to them in the first place, so that's cool. Like, but you know, you'll be surprised with how well people respond to like putting yourself out there and like trying to make those connections and making that effort. And that could be like anything from, you know, an IG message or a DM to just like actually like trying to set up like a coffee meeting with someone, you know. And that's not always easy to do. I think trying to exist and work and live and thrive and pay rent and bills and then create art in like expensive cities with hectic schedules is hard. But like if you can even like take an hour out of like your week to start to kind of do these things, I think, and being disciplined with that, I think that's really important.
Yeah. I would also add, I think that sometimes people can get caught up in doing certain things because they're like, I'm doing this and here's like the direct benefit to me. Like, you know, sometimes people, you know, will be like, I want to reach out to this person because I know they can benefit me. And there's kind of an it's inauthentic, that connection. But if you just, you know, you're like, this person I have a lot in common with, we have, you know, similar values, meet those people, and maybe down the line you'll find an opportunity to collaborate or to help each other, and that's really great. But you want to make those authentic connections. Also, something that I see a lot is like, let's again use music for example. Is people only like go engage with the community outside of something that's beneficial to you.
Yeah.
Go to shows that
Yeah.
you aren't a part of.
Yeah.
Go to shows that your like friends are in. Like some people I know will only go to shows that either they're playing or maybe like their best friends playing it. Like you like engage, and then they're wondering like, why did no one show up to my show? And it's like, because we're not building that community of like, let's go and support each other's things. And so it's, it's kind of, a give and take. If you want someone to support you and what you're doing and come to your shows and keep venues busy and keep bills busy, you have to put that work kind of, into the community without necessarily expecting it to be reciprocated, even though it will. So that's something that I would say. And it also helps you keep on the pulse of things, especially if you're coming at this not maybe as a musician, but maybe as a promoter, a booker, a programmer. Just going to your own events, you're not going to know what the pulse is. You're not going to know what's really going on and what people are talking about, what people are excited about, like what new bands there are, what new exciting things there are, what new venues there are, unless you actually go and engage in the community. Yeah. So I think that's something that I think a lot of people miss. And again, doing it not in like a, how can this benefit me right now? Yeah. But just like, how can I, keep my community building? So yeah, people will be like, oh, especially, in Calgary, they'll be like, no one wants to come to shows anymore, no one wants to do anything. But then they also won't go to shows, you know what I mean? And so it's like you have to give a little, right?
Yeah, and I think like to add to that, you don't necessarily only also have to like stay in the lane of like being an artist or being a programmer. One thing that I really love about Wavelength, and this is like a little bit of a plug for that organization that I'm on the board of, but what they do a really good job of is programming shows and really like working with artists and really, using this model of like cross collaboration. And like you'll go to a show and there'll be like a hip hop act, a punk act, like really like indie darling, like indie rock act. Like there'll be multiple bands playing, and you'll be exposed to something you never knew. You'll be exposed to like a vibe that you could only exist in that space at that moment, at that time, and you'll just be in a room full of folks that you typically maybe wouldn't engage with in your own bubble, And I think that's really important, like cross collaboration, cross promotion too, like, reaching out to artists and just be like, hey, I'm doing this show, love you to come out. Would you be able to like, even make an ask, like, would you be able to share about that? I'd love to plug something that you have going on. And hopefully connections can be made that way. And you also save some money on promotional costs too. But yeah, I think it's really like, just also being like, if I want this show to happen, let me try and do that myself. Like I don't have to only depend on this promoter to do that, or reach out to a promoter and be like, hey, I have a great idea for a show that could be like, that we can put on.
I love that, because one of the things I was thinking about too is I feel like, being community driven and actually community focused, right? And I think from an artistic perspective, like as an artist, we can be very self-focused sometimes. It's all about like, what bills can I get on, what shows can I put on, or like be a part of, who do I reach out to put me on and to help me out. But it's like, I think one of the things that I've been focusing on over the past year that's kind of completely changed my mind and like gave me such like an open view of music and different avenues and lanes is being community focused and like, well, how can I help other people? Well, if I'm having this problem, like other people must be having this problem too. Like, oh, are there things happening that I can be part of? I can create my own community. How can I do that? Or how hard could it be to put on a show? And like looking at grants and seeing that a lot of them are like, oh, for community organizations or for bigger shows and I'm like, oh, and then just actually reaching out to other artists and like seeing people whose music that I really enjoyed and reaching out and, okay, what are you struggling with right now? And just like, I can relate to that. And, I love that point, just because like, yeah, like you can start your own things, but also like, it's not in a self-focused way. It's just, how can I help other people in the same position as me, or that feel the same ways that I do, or even like if the issue is there's too many dudes in the industry, it's like, okay, well, how do I get around other chicks? And then how do we put on a showcase for girls, right? So it's like just thinking outside of the box a little bit.
Yeah, well, I think that's, something that I also want to bring up is just like, don't be afraid to do your own thing. Like I know that when I started in music, I was really lucky. I got somehow a job at Sled Island with no experience, and that really opened me up to this. And then I was like, I want to put on shows, I want to book, I want to program. no one would let me do it. It was all very boys club, the same
Yeah.
6 old men who had
Yeah.
been programming all the time, and I was
Yeah.
like, and I just tried to get let in, and I tried to go the traditional way, and it didn't work, and so I was like, well, fuck it, I'm just gonna do it myself. And so I started my own promotions. The same thing when I was doing, film programming. I'm like, I want to program, but sometimes they can, there's lots of things we know that can be very gatekeeping. You try like, oh, I want to get as part of these systems, but sometimes it's better to just break off and start your own thing. And something that I wanted to kind of go there because, like I talked about, trying to get into these places and feeling like constantly blocked. How do we go about creating opportunity? We go and we thought we made these opportunities, and sometimes I feel like, people can be like, well, I fought for this, so and I struggled to get here, so you have to do it too, right? You have to struggle to get here. But how can we make better opportunities for new voices who want to come in? Instead of we got here and then closing the door firmly behind us, how can we make sure that we keep that door open and that it's easier for people to kind of come in and join the community and start their own things, start their own shows, do their own promotion, start their own publicity, all those things that feel like it was just a big secret, how they did it. How can we make it easier for people
I think
to
a
come
really
in?
good way, and I think arguably the only way, is when people get into positions to gatekeep, regardless of race, gender, create accountability and allow feedback and hear the narratives of other people who are being served by whatever organization it is that they've implemented. Because without the feedback and accountability, if they are gatekeeping in a way that shuts the door for other people, there needs to be a higher level of somebody who knows that, right? Because I think we all, as a human, it's human nature to want to gatekeep, to it's power, right? I think that's just human nature. But the only way I think to really navigate that and to even prevent it is accountability. And I think that's something that is, in my experience and that I've seen, is really, really missing in the arts community, especially with leadership with a lot of these organizations that do gatekeep and opportunities even for artists, right? And it's a big problem. I think there definitely needs to be, accountability and room for feedback from people who have been affected by leaders and the organizations that they have.
Yeah, I mean, this is a really tough one. I hate I hate when people are like, oh, I have to jump through these hoops, so you have to as well. I mean, the whole point of any of this is to hopefully, if we're talking about a greater ecosystem, make things easier for the next person, and then they do that for the person after. I mean, I think really what it comes down to is connecting with people who have to start, and I think that for sure there needs to be questions of accountability and all of that. I think that's really big, but I think to start, it's about connecting with people who have shared values. And that sounds really simple and maybe too simple, but I think there is something with connecting with people and folks, whether they're artists or not, with shared values and trying to build something from that, in terms of tangible action. So for instance, if we were to really whittle down in even this conversation, I think we all have conversations that are probably baked into the spirit of what we're discussing on a daily basis. This is a panel discussion about it, but I have conversations every day with people, and it's kind of dreaming about the world you want to see within our arts communities and stuff. And what it comes down to first and foremost to me is connect with people with shared values, see how you can create some cool shit with them, and create new systems. There's an organization in Toronto, they're called Unit 2, and they are really focused on the intersection between artwork and care work, which I think is an undeniable relation. I don't think you can have one without the other, nor should you approach artwork without considering care work that exists with that. And so they put on artists, they'll platform them, but they'll also put tools in place. They have a lot of not just skills-based tools for musicians and things of that nature, but they'll do wellness workshops and mental health workshops, and they will help people in their community who are struggling. They'll set up GoFundMes for folks who are in are more marginalized in those communities, and they provide like a space to platform artists, sure, but it goes deeper than that, and that speaks to like a greater arts ecosystem that I think should also be part of this discussion. If we care about creating and care about platforming the creation of folks, I think it is also important to like look at the bigger picture of like why we're doing this in the first place, and that is to like hopefully create new systems and healthier ecosystems.
Totally, and that actually leads right to kind of a question. I'm going to start with this. Does anyone remember what happened with Burger Records? Does anyone know what happened with Burger Records? Okay, so Burger Records was a California-based record label that were around for a really long time, really big cult status, and then someone started an Instagram account called I can't remember what it's called, but it's called that way, Burger Records, and basically turns out that this record company was fostering years and years of just predatory behavior, statutory, like all sorts of really terrible things, and it kind of and there's been I feel like a lot of reckonings in the music scene just over the last couple of years, like continuously, but what it kind of created, and something that, and the reason I bring that up, because someone brought up something interesting, is that because people are like, oh, this is call out culture is bad, and social media, and people calling out social media is bad, but if you think about it, music does, like our music scene, we don't have like a music scene HR. We don't have a music scene, right? And so it's like, I think with community, we have to create things. Like with community, we have to create our own HR. And like, is it, is doing it on social media the most effective? No. Do we have many other options? Also no. Do we have a shared benefits that we get as freelance artists? No. So do we create them through, like you said, this kind of mental health thing, right? And so I think, is there anything you guys want to add on like the way that community can kind of fill these gaps as as artists, freelance artists in the music community? Because again, you're a freelance person, you're music, you don't have access to like someone does something and you can't go to like Calgary music scene HR, you kind of have to find ways. And so like, can you guys think of like other ways that like community helps support?
If I may start, I think like it's tricky, right? Because I think like expecting people to like call these fucked up things that like there's no other way to say it that they see, call those out. It takes like folks, everyone out be at a different pace for that, and it also takes like you feeling safe to be able to do that, and you feeling protected. Like if I'm going to go out on this like sort of limb and like do this and be brave about it in this way, is like, will someone have my back? Whether it's a perceived power that person holds or it's an actual power that like the person that you're looking to call out holds. I think it's, again, like it goes back to putting yourself in a situation, surrounding yourself with folks, and building like an allyship there to begin with, so at least you like can do these things in like, not numbers, but like you in a through like this through safety, I guess. Like, but I don't think that we can expect everyone to, approach these things in the same way. Like, I think that there's so many power dynamics like that exist, that really are intersectional, and that we have to like view through like an intersectional lens. But I don't think that there's like a one size fits all to like making that happen. I sadly think it is really sticky and it's messy, and I think where you start is just feeling as safe as you can if you are going to like call someone out that carries that power, that you have no other people will have your back.
Yeah, and I think that also like things like this, like conferencing, which again, like something you might see really commonly in the professional world. But I think it's important to, have these conversations as people in this community, and like being able to identify that like, okay, I can see people that I see out in my community here to like learn and to do more in like professional development. I think it's important. I think that's again something that, I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that, because you were talking about, something that would help with, this more accountability, right?
Yeah, I think so. I also think that I like when you said, like getting around people with similar values too, right? But I also think that, you know, to me personally, and just based on my experience, that seems so idealistic. Because, like, let's be real, this is music. There not a lot of people even have values, even if they say that they do. Well, like, it sounds really assholey, but like, girl, it sounds kind of rude, but it's like, it just is what it is. And you when you get into very close proximity with even people who claim to be community builders, when they say that they're doing it for artists, when you see it up close and even develop whatever you can of a relationship with a lot of people, it's for self-gain and it's rooted in narcissism. And also, like, I don't say that to be condemning. It's like, you know, we're music people. There is, and that's why I say, if you know that people have a tendency to gravitate to power, or even in our communities having more narcissistic traits than another industry or other people, cool, let's work around that. How do we create ways for safety, even if we know that this is going to be the thing? I think the approach, you know, it's idealistic to say, like, let's get around people with similar values, in my opinion, but also, like, to take that a step further, it's like, well, how do you be proactive instead of reactive when something happens? How do we think about these things ahead of time? If we know that there's, you know, like, one of the things I get so sick of answering as an artist, like, I've been doing this now for, I think now 15 years. I say over 10 because, like, you're not supposed to be old as a girl. But, you know, like, I've been asked this question since I was like 13, 14 years old. And it's like, what's it like navigating a male-dominated industry? Like, shut up. Like, well, you know, like, and I can only give you the same answer so many times. And at a certain point, it's like, when is it not going to be? And when are there going to be organizations where they're women-led? And when do you get to feel safe? And you don't even understand the weight of that question when you're like a teenager, as a girl. You don't realize it until, like, I'm an adult now, and it's like, oh, that's why they were asking me questions. And you can't even say some of the real shit that you've seen or experienced in, like, small scale industries like that, or interviews like that, because you can't say certain words even, like, on radio, right? So it's like, it's one of those things where it's like, how do you be as proactive as possible to create safe spaces? And absolutely, to your point, it's like, you do have to feel safe enough to say things. But even, like, for me, like, there's things that I would like to speak about even, or create accountability, or maybe voice my concerns, but, like, I don't have as much community clout as some so-and-so does. And in fact, because I'm a girl and there's a persona around me, or a perception, because I have X amount of followers on social media, and because maybe some people may perceive me to be attractive, or because I confidently speak my mind, and, you know, there's a perception that comes with that. Also being racialized, it's, oh, she's got a big mouth, or she's opinionated. Never mind that I also went to university and have a Juno Award, right? People will say it in my face, oh, like, you're opinionated, which is crazy to me, right? But it's like, that comes with things. So you say things, and I'm also a rapper, so I talk my shit on a track, on a record sometimes. That doesn't change that, you know, I have an educated perspective, or I'm able to be eloquent. But I think people use all of these things to also discredit any statements that you make. So, like, it's very hard to feel safe, even when it comes to, like, oh, you have that experience too. We can have safety in numbers, but it's like, people will find ways to find holes and discredit even a person who is a victim to certain things. So it's like, it's a compounded thing. And, like, how do you? And I think it's just, like, reactive approaches to some of these things. And, like, I love your point about, like, we don't have an arts HR. There is no accountability for these things. And I think post BLM, like, again, let's take this a step further. I'm tired of also talking about racism and, yes, you're a girl, yes, you're a racialized woman, cool. Next thing, if we come from marginalized communities, don't just, like, throw opportunities at people that are just because they're Black. What are their credentials? What is their character? What are their values? Like, in real life, are they being assessed by psychologists? Is there an HR that can be accountable to these things? Because, like, even a lot of these artistic industries, even in Calgary, like, big name organizations are funding Calgary leadership. And they're individuals for their community organizations. And, like, you're backing that up. And what are you backing up? What are you enabling?
right? And there is a very distinctive unequal power dynamic there, and it's very disconcerting. It's super disconcerting.
Absolutely. And I will say, like, I think that some positive things that we're making is I think that there was a long time, like, people that did hold, positions of power in certain organizations that kind of did it uninterrupted for a very long time and without kind of any questions. And I think that something I do see positive is that I think people are kind of like starting to question. It's like, okay, if you're in a position of power, you're going to be held accountable. And I think that that's something that, community does do. And I think it was scary for some people at first. I think it was scary to people who were like, uh-oh, I'm going to get my comeuppance soon. But I think that that's another way that, community can support each other beyond just being like, oh, hey, we're friends, and oh, do you want to collaborate on this track or on this show? It's like how can we provide resources for each other? How can we provide safety for each other?
Yeah.
Yes?
Riaz, I have a question about change the subject. I mean, I was listening to that.
Of course.
I came here just looking at your website before, I was inspired by the reimagining venues.
Right, yeah.
Because I'm looking at doing something similar in Calgary with the venue. It's 5,000 square feet with 3 floors and things. So, and this kind of blows my mind that you're sitting here, so maybe I could talk to you after. Or
Yeah, for
can you
sure.
just talk about that project, what it means to the community and what it means to touring artists? Obviously, if you have like a larger space for, because Calgary's kind of a place where people bypass a lot, and unfortunately, because there isn't a venue that has 200 seats or, that's professional and trusted.
Right.
So, I just think it's something that needs to be done. And I know they're looking at it here as well, so I could really learn from somebody like yourselves.
Yeah, I mean, I think and we can use that question to actually jump off of what you were saying too, where we talk about for sure there's a fuck ton of problematic things that happen in so many industries, not excluding music. You think I was working for Music Calgary in 2000. I moved out to Toronto 2007 to pursue a career in the arts because I didn't want to work oil and gas. Thought that was my only option at the time, and actually the city's mind-blowingly changed since in such a beautiful way, which I come back and I just love to see it every single time I come back here. I moved back to Calgary for a year, worked for Music Calgary, and then moved back to Toronto. And Toronto, what you hear about is it's multicultural hub. All this is true, but for sure, in the music industry, even out there, who runs the labels? It is people who've held power for the same time. Who is making decisions on who gets grant funding? But to talk about that stuff, it sucks, and I think there is there's change that is slowly happening and not as quickly as we would like. But just to bring it back to a productive place in terms of a conversation about resource sharing and community building. I think trying to get to a place where we're talking about music venues, we did this research report with the University of Toronto at Wavelength Music about reimagining music venues, and one thing that's true across the board for any of these major Canadian cities, Calgary, Edmonton, Montreal's even getting bad, is the fact that it's such an expensive place to live. And so that's just on a personal level, rents every month keep increasing, which I'm sure many of us have been affected by. And then, we're losing our venues. And so it's also about trying to figure out who we can collaborate with, who we can hit up for space. And I'm sure that is happening constantly. Sled Island does it. I know we do it with we did our winter festival at the Lithuanian banquet hall, and because it was a banquet hall, the sound was incredible.
European
but it's about
banquet
thinking
halls are
about
underrated.
Yeah,
European banquet halls are
European
best.
go to your local European banquet hall and hit them up and try to throw a show there. But I think it's I think it is really about thinking outside of even just the music community and hitting folks up and where you can to be hey, I want to throw this party. Do you have space? We'd love to do this, and and also maintaining those relationships. I think only tapping into certain communities for certain asks is very tokenizing. So I would say look at ways in which you can continue building those relationships and bring people from other arts communities, and I think we often or like look at things like this is a visual arts thing and this is a performing arts thing and this is a music thing, and see how like you can have a more multidisciplinary approach to the events you throw, where it's not just like a show, but maybe it's a show with like artists, like a visual art workshop that is also there, and it's like a half a day thing, and it's not just focused on music, and it brings many different folks out to engage with things they might not typically engage with.
Yeah. When you tell me about my mind, I think we look at like, let's look at our music community, like maybe like the music, like the hip hop community in Calgary, small, punk community, small, but like you start to bring those together, okay, all of a sudden it's bigger. Then you look, okay, well the music community is still kind of small. The film community, the art community, but when you like look at it as the Calgary arts community, all of a sudden it doesn't seem so small. And so I think engaging with other mediums, I know I've been really lucky that I've been able to work in music and visual art and film, and I think, kind of the things the projects that I get most excited about are like, how can like I incorporate all those things. Like I love like doing like a live score with like a local band and like a silent film, like that's super fun. Like engaging in like, and then you can also engage in different venues. Like, okay, then all of a sudden that opens up cinemas, it opens up galleries, it opens up lots of different things when you kind of collaborate. And we all, under those things, we all kind of are under the arts umbrella. We all have the same, you'll find that a lot of the issues that maybe you see in music are the same issues that you're going to see in the arts community, in the film community, in the writing community. And so, and being able to engage, I think, and being able to build our community and make it even stronger, right?
That's great.
Yeah.
Does anyone? We only have about.
Thanks for the answers. That really resonated.
That's a great question.
No, for sure, we can totally have a chat.
So this is kind of, again, bouncing off topics, but
No, go ahead.
Hugh, you might be the better person to ask us. Just kind of question from a budding studio engineer, but all of the like music producers groups that I'm in, and just from the industry as a whole, it is a very male-centric kind of position, and I always just kind of wondered like why is that? Like what's the deal? Do you know of any like female studio producers, I mean, famous or not? Like, I'm really just curious to know, are there girls doing this as well?
There are, yeah. So in Toronto is Wonder Girl. When I was out there, I haven't been super connected in the Toronto community since I left around like 2017, 2018. But yeah, Wonder Girl, I think they're popping up a lot now. There's a lot of like Afrobeats DJs even, which are also dabbling into production and studio as well. And even just like on a bigger scale, like there's just a lot of female producers and female engineers that are kind of budding up. And I think like that's a great question, and thank you for asking that. And I think just like, being aware of these things is really important, because sometimes it's like, they're not, like I was reading a study last night to actually prepare for this, and it was something to the effect of like, it was a study done by a lady named Charlie Wall Andrews, who I'm connected with recently. I connected with her actually because I was reading her work, and she does a lot of work in Canada for gender equity. And the conversation or the paper that she wrote was something about female like studios and female-led like productions and engineering services as well, and like just that there weren't a lot. And I think like I brought a statistic with me, and it was advanced research found that in 2013 59% of graduates from 8 of the leading postgraduate directing programs in the UK were women, but compared that with Elizabeth Freestone's research, which found of the top 10 subsided theatres in the UK, only 24% of directors working in those theatres were women. So it goes from like 59% of women in this industry or come from these studies are qualified, but only 24% of those are like directed. And it helps to be aware, because asking these questions and when it comes to any of these platforms or the discourse like we're doing now, for us to be like, well, what are you guys doing to help women? Are there initiatives in place to encourage them to do these things? Do women want to? How do we find out, right? I think it's a great question.
Can I ask one follow-up to that as well? So before COVID hit, like I'm a music teacher in the public schools. Just before COVID shut everything down, I kind of had a rare opportunity to restructure a music class I'd taken over.
Nice.
And once everything hit the fan, I had a couple students reach out to me, but most notably, and I wish that I could have kept in contact, but I had a girl reach out to me. She was interested in like electronic music production, and like we shared a couple emails back and forth. Like I showed her how to use GarageBand. Then things happened, kind of disappeared off the face of the earth. But it's always been with me. Like I'd love to do more things helping kids in general, but especially how do you. I think this probably comes from the fact that, now I'm, almost 40-year-old male. How does one attract young girls into this industry? Like, how do we incentivize them to jump into an industry which basically just looks like it's man all the way across the board?
Because I kind of felt a lot like that when I was going into music. And I think, again, it's like, when you find yourself, because now I find myself where I'm like, I know what I'm doing, I'm such a power, I hold positions of power. So like it's one thing to be able to like when people come up to you and being like, oh, can you help me with this, saying yes, which is like say yes. But it's also like looking out and being like and like seeking out people for opportunity and being like, I have this. So for example, this is non-music related but can be theirs. I have a screening series at the Globe every month. We program a film, and again, I tried to get into programming for so long and no one would let me, so I said, I'm gonna do it myself. But every once in a while, like, I'll give a month to someone who I'm like, maybe they didn't come and ask, but I'm like, I can see you're really interested in film. I can see that you might be good for this opportunity. If you need help, I'll show you how this works. Let me show you, and you can take over a month and do that. So I think it's like actually like seeking, like not just being open to people asking, but actively seeking out people. And then again, I think that when it's like, how can we incentivize more people to come in, it's like whether that's women or people of color, people with disabilities, when you see yourself, like when you see people that are like you see that as an opportunity. You're like, oh, well then I can do that too. And so something's gonna right away, but I think it's just like getting in there. And another thing I'll say is sometimes, and I don't know if you feel this as a racialized woman, is that sometimes it feels like when you're not just a straight white man, is that you have to be perfect. And that if you aren't perfect, then you're fucking up. Is that you're like, oh, it's like, and you kind of, in a weird way, you're expected to be perfect and put on a pedestal, but you're like so ready to get knocked off that pedestal any chance. It's like, oh my God, it's a woman doing this. And then you kind of maybe make a mistake because you're human and you're learning. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, that's why we don't let women do this. So that's why we don't let people, you know what I mean? And so I think it's just like giving people more grace, giving yourself more grace. Cause I know that's also like, can be really self-imposed when you feel like you have to be a representative of a certain community. It's like when you fuck up, you're like, well, and so I think being kind with yourself, but also being kind with others. And again, not just waiting for people to ask you for help, but being like, how can I help you? And putting out yourself.
I think that also plays into like an adverse effect too, because as much as you're always prepared for somebody to try and knock you off, you also live in such a defensive manner, right? Mm-hmm. Especially, and your being is very defensive, even like in like the arts, because you don't know who's going to come at you at any given time, whether it's girls, guys, or for what reason, right? And oftentimes, like even coming from like hip hop, it's like you can encourage girls to partake, right? And I think like that's one thing, but also like it was only Nicki Minaj when I started rapping. That's at the time. There was girls before that, but like the narrative, even in the industry narrative among like black people who knew hip hop and R&B was they only let one girl rap at a time. They only let one girl in at a time. So, and now that's different, but like you don't also factor in like you see a Nicki and it's like that's so cool, I want to do that. It's not even about being good enough to do it. It's not about the work. It's about like you're not even going to be safe now. It's hip hop. They glorify, and like again, we don't talk about the issues within the culture either. These little boys, even in Calgary, Edmonton, we grow up on it, and we also internalize misogyny and misogynistic narratives and violence against women and violence against racialized women, right? And so like that's the mentality that these guys have in these spaces, leadership or otherwise. So it's like even preparing somebody for things like that would be so helpful, because like there is a resentment of like, well, why didn't anyone tell me this? How come I'm finding it out now? How come I have to deal with the fallout now? You have no idea, right? And you're a kid, you just love rap, you love music, and so you just want to play. You just want to play in the sandbox. But like
there are repercussions and things that happen at being a woman and racialized in some of these spaces where it's like talking about these things are very important. And like, I think kids now they're ahead of their time anyways, because we're so advanced in technology, right? But I think like the preparation is just as equally as important as like bringing them in, because my next question is like, is it even like, should women be in spaces of like, if there isn't accountability, if there isn't female-led directorship or leadership, and even if it is, like, who are they? What dialogues or mentalities have they internalized if it's hip-hop?
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to add is, you can be like, oh, we're going to hire women, and then you like a woman, and then you bring a woman in, and it's like a very like uncomfortable. It's like maybe you have like, I don't know, like a swimsuit calendar on the wall, and then the men are always making like inappropriate jokes, and it's just like, and like if it's like you can be like, oh, we're going to hire more women, we're going to hire more people of color, we're going to hire more people with disabilities, and then you bring them into a space that's kind of just you didn't prepare for, like that's like hostile, that still has that very male, white, able-bodied, cis, straight energy. They're not going to thrive there, and then people are going to be like, well, why? Well, we tried to hire someone, but then they quit and it didn't work out. Well, it's like, well, you didn't actually do any of the work to kind of make your space less male, less white, less whatever. And so it's like bringing someone onto your team isn't enough. In fact, bringing someone onto your team that you haven't made space for is actually perpetuating violence. So it's like you have to actually do the work before and like make sure that you're bringing them into a space where, again, you're not tokenizing them, their voices are heard, and it's like a safe space for them, which I think sometimes people just are like, oh, we'll add a woman to the team, we'll add, and then they're just like, done. It's like, no, that's
like I was saying too, like that's the issue with tokenism, right? And when you have something like the post-BLM time of like, the gatekeepers are old white men, now you're putting in like dudes who grew up on hip hop who like are maybe worse than some of those white dudes. Like I've felt safer in rooms of like old white men than I have in like hip hop led environments where there's like black men who are the head of leadership there, right? So like, again, that's a question. And like, am I better off as a racialized woman in a room full of black men or in an organization that's led by black men and it's versus white? Like in my experience, no, I'm not. So who are you benefiting? And where are these like conversations being had to even ask, right? Like it's really important stuff, I think, to consider.
Absolutely. I think we had a question, and I think we'll make that the last.
Yeah, I was just gonna really quickly say, are you here in the city?
Yeah, yes.
Yeah, okay, because there are a lot of non-male producers and artists out here, and I would love to connect, because there's so many.
Same,
Yeah, I mean, I just for like
I want to know.
information at the very least.
Yeah.
I don't know.
For sure. Yeah, no, it's booming out here. I got you.
Do we have any other kind of questions or anything else that we wanted to ask?
I wouldn't mind if we have some time.
Yeah,
I don't
absolutely.
Want to
No, go ahead.
I was wondering if you could speak potentially on how to build community with people of a similar background to you. So like, for example, I'm Iranian ethnically, and I sing in Farsi and in English, but I never lived in Iran because of the political situation. But as part of my work, I try to talk always about like what's going on in Iran and like kind of my association with the culture. So I was wondering if you have any advice, because sometimes it does kind of feel like you're representing the whole group, which is not what I'm trying to do, because the whole point is that there's diversity within the group as well, right? So I'm trying to do this like my interpretation of like Persian infused music. So I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, these conversations, like, they can happen locally, you can, which I'm sure you've probably done research, like, in terms of who's local, but, coming from Toronto, and I work at a theater company as well, as a marketing director, and, like, there's, like, several Iranian, Canadian musicians who I could, like, put you in touch with, just starting there, but there are folks, like, doing that work, and I think like it goes back to also what you were saying, like being connected to folks, like, when I was a kid, like seeing Corner Shop, which like is this like South Asian band from the UK, like that was so big for me, and just like knowing who else exists, like anytime, like it sounds ridiculous sometimes, but if I'm at an indie rock show, I'll see like another brown person across the room and I'll be like, I'll feel it, I'll like feel good about it, and I think that's so important, and like that could like, it just like, it's such an important thing to like have those connections and culturally speaking, and then you can bridge beyond that. But yeah, I definitely have some folks that I could likely put you in touch with starting like as a start, because there are people creating that kind of music, definitely in Toronto.
I have an idea. Are you well connected in the Iranian community here in Calgary?
So I moved to Calgary just over a year ago, so from Vancouver. So I have a stronger connection in Vancouver, especially because my mom and my grandpa are also both singers, like traditional singers. They live in Vancouver, but I'm trying to grow kind of that connection here in Calgary as well. So I live with my Iranian family, so like their community I know, but I want to be able to like branch out further.
Yeah, for sure. See if there's like kind of, we were talking about European banquet halls. I know that there's like usually associations, like Iranian associations of like Calgary, like just cross-culturally in Calgary. So even getting involved with them, and like part of that is that your political disposition too, right? And like wanting to speak about those issues. You can get involved in like the Iranian community who is passionate about political issues to also get behind you with those and to help you advocate for some of those things and educate people on those things. So I think that would be great. And then like I think by fluke you would just find people who are interested in music because it's in the community. So I think my advice would just be to like try to get as closely knit and like again similar values. This is a good one because you actually have similar values and culture. Right, so just getting well connected with them and seeing who's there and who believes in the same things as you, and like you can also start your own thing even within that. Right?
That's a really good point too.
The only thing I'll say is, and again, kind of going back to expanding, your Indigenous player, like you said, you have connections in Vancouver. It's like maybe you're having trouble making Iranian music connections in Calgary, but internet friends are still great, and you can find some, in Toronto and Vancouver. But then I would also like, if you're like, well, I can't have all internet friends, I want some here. Again, expanding, because, at the end, you're an Iranian musician, but you're also an Iranian artist. Maybe there's, Iranian people who are working in visual art or film, who, maybe they don't give you kind of the exact same thing as you get from another Iranian musician, but maybe someone who's like doing their art practice in, with the Persian language or like, with, through an Iranian lens, like even that can be just like supportive. And then you can, support each other. Like maybe there's, I'm sure there's an Iranian Calgarian filmmaker, and maybe you meet and you kind of get inspired, and then maybe you like do a song for like a film of theirs, or what I mean, they could do a video for you, but like find maybe people who are kind of share like that kind of common thing, but with other art niches, and then you can still feel inspired and creative, but kind of expand, kind of
check universities too.
Yeah. Wow, that was amazing. Thank you.
And I think like Alberta Music has like a directory on their site. So that's a great place to check. And I think Music Calgary is also working on one specifically for locally, but Alberta Music definitely has like a directory on their website that you can make those connections through as well.
Awesome. Thank you.
Well, I think we are out of time, so thank you, Riaz. Thank you, everyone. It was a great discussion. We'll be around at the conference and at the showcases, so if you want to come say hi to us, please do. I just volunteered.